So this one is about forgiveness. Again, something that's very current with myself and with one or two others that I'm working closely with just now. Something that came up last night. A very good friend of mine, a vital part of the Vortex community. Someone that's been suffering, very, very much as a result of something that happened a long time ago, over 30 years ago. And still carrying it with them. And the topic came up last night during one of the private sessions, and it got to the point where it's like, right, okay, so how do we get beyond this? How do you get to that place? Because their intention is to heal, to get beyond all the pain, all the suffering, all the damage that was done by another person. And then at that point, like, how do you get beyond it? And again, I'm speaking from own experience. This is something that I have worked on a lot over my life, something that I had to deal with a wee bit over the weekend, just 3 or 4 days ago. Something that I became very, very good at. Something that took me a long time to learn how it went together, and how to make peace with it, and eventually not just live with it, but how to get beyond it completely. Something that thanks to the meditation, the spiritual practices, my desire to heal myself and find relief and get to that place of transcendence, that I was able to come up with a process and a practice and I suppose a system that enabled me to forgive every single thing that had ever been done wrong against me in this lifetime. And obviously in the world just now, it's something that a lot of people could do with learning. It's how to forgive, and to forgive, and the whole thing, forgive but don't forget, or to forgive and to forget. Even beyond that, it's to forgive and then to how you transcend it. And there's many different parts to that. So my own experience, I've always been through, anybody that's privy to my story or has tuned into either the Godcasts or been on about my work, they've heard me talking about all the different things that I've been through, the pain and the hurt and the different life experience that that I was able to make my way through on my own life's journey. And all of this, is me basically the desire to help people, the desire to help you find your way through stuff so you don't need to carry it any longer. The most difficult thing for me was the sexual stuff, the sexual abuse stuff, which came from different areas in my life, and it was different people at different stages of my life, and it's something that I have worked with a lot of people over the years. And thinking back to when I first came to the realisation that it was something that had to be healed within me, something I had to get beyond, something I had to deal with. That was really, really challenging right at the very beginning, because it's like, how do you, where do you even begin? And again, depending on how severe it's been, depending on how, what you've had to go through, what challenges you've had to face, I was, in a position where, and again, there's so many more people that have been through far worse than I ever went through. I believe that I got a wee kind of snippet of like so many different bits of pain and suffering and contrast and hardship, and so that I could basically make my way through it, so that I could then pass it on to other people. But I get there's people that have been through stuff that they maybe consider that, or maybe think that they can't get beyond, they can't find forgiveness for another person. That at some point becomes a choice. The challenge for me, if you don't forgive and you carry it with you, is that the pain and the suffering and the dis-ease that comes with it, the anger and the bitterness and the blame and the revenge, and that's all low vibration. And when you're carrying it with you, when you're basically carrying whatever it is that's happened to you, and when something gets triggered within you, the situation last night was with this person basically saw someone else that had done, something that's, unforgivable to a family member a long time ago, and something that affected them very, very deeply. Happened when they were a young child, and had an negative impact on their life, and something that could never ever be replaced. And then at that point, when you see, and they can see it as well, the negative impact and all the kind of the challenges that are faced, and how it basically shapes you, certainly when it's really heavy trauma, how that can impact you, and how it can, the decisions that you make in your life, and how that manifests within your life in terms of that negative event, but it's like a PTSD many times. And the trauma you experience, when it creates those lasting memories, those kind of, really significant events that they can then change, every single thing that happens within your life, then it's very difficult to get beyond it. But, it's like for me, in the way that I did it, and this is particularly with the sexual stuff, and it was one person in particular, and I've spoke about it in great detail in one of the Godcasts a way back, and it was to do with the sexual abuse. And it's like, I remember thinking, like, how do you forgive that? How do you get beyond that? How do you how do you make peace with that? How do you transcend it? How do you get it out of your life? How do you move past it? How do you let it go? And right at the very beginning, it took me, even the contemplation of that, like, what do I need to do to get this out of my life? Because it's like a bad tooth, and it's making you sick, and it's poisoning your system. Every single time that I thought about it, every single time that it was coming up, then when you start to have these thoughts and these memories, then the toxicity that's released just with the chemistry within your brain when you're thinking about it, the stress response is released, the nervous system being activated, your defences going up, your body gets prepared, because when you think about something, then your body automatically, the unconscious mind and the autonomic nervous system, the way they work is they basically generate the chemistry within your body to deal with a situation that is probably never ever going to happen again. And when you think about it, as I was right at the very beginning, then you go straight back to, a lot of times you go back and you relive the event, which is what most people do with trauma, and even the meta stories I hear with therapists that are basically taking people through, like making them relive the experiences. The amount of people I've spoken to that they go through really traumatic therapy by the therapist trying to get them to relive it, or making them relive it so they can actually get it up, and whether it's trying to make sense, or whether it's trying to see it from a different perspective, or I've never ever understood that. And that's just the ignorance of the therapist, doesn't actually know what they're doing. To go through it once is bad enough. To relive it and to talk about it, I would say the way that I do it, is to do that once, so you need to identify what it is that's causing the problems. That's the starter for 10. But then how do you get beyond it? And it took me an awful long time, especially with this one significant event in particular. It took me many years. It's like the layers of an onion. I did it through spiritual practices. I would do it in meditation, and it wasn't like I was going on every single day and I'm going to dig this up and see what's happening with it. It didn't work like that. The intention was to get beyond all of it, every single bit of it. And God knows there's been so many different things within my life where I've had to do that in so many different areas, but this one thing in particular, which was maybe the worst that I had to deal with, because the way that it affects you negatively, the way that it separates you, from yourself in some way, the way that it separates you from the true self, the way that it separates you from your heart, the way that it can separate you from your soul, especially that really kind of heavy stuff. It's that, like, how do you deal with that? And it's no one quick fix, one quick fix solution, unfortunately. For me, it took a long time. And over many years, and sitting, tens, if not hundreds of thousands of hours in contemplation and meditation, during the night, being in my heart, being in my soul, the intention to connect to the divine, sitting in silence, reconnecting back to what was available to me in terms of, God, consciousness, the field, reconnecting back to the high vibrations that are the complete opposite of everything that normally comes up when you start to think about what somebody's done to you when you're in those places of anger and resentment and bitterness and blame and shame a lot of the time as well, especially with that kind of stuff. Then the dis-ease that manifests within the body getting so far out of whack, getting so far out of harmony, the coherence that basically gets taken away from you, just because your body's creating this really toxic chemistry, all because of what you're thinking about. That leads to sickness, that leads to dis-ease, and I was very aware of that, the impact that every single time that I thought about this, what it would do with this, the way I would feel in my stomach, and knowing what I even knew back then. This is going back, probably 20 years ago when this started, this intentional healing journey of these specific things. Then, I had to get to a place, right, okay, so what do I need to do? And it came through meditation, it came through the spiritual practices. I would be sitting in silence, and then this particular person would come up, and okay, so to be aware of that it's there, that something needs dealt with, And then the next question is, right, okay, so I'm not enjoying that, and it's not making me feel good, and it's making me sick. Like, how do I get beyond it? What do I need to do to get beyond it? And I remember the first time ever, the notion of the possibility of forgiveness, and I almost laughed during my meditation, because it's like, how do you forgive that? You know, what would you need to, who would you need to become, was a great question. Actually, who would I need to be to get to a place where, you know, like Jim got beyond that? And that holds true with so many things in the world. You know, you look at the world just now, and the pain and the suffering, and, you know, when you look at the amount of wars and the people that are dying unnecessarily within the world, the amount of families that are getting decimated with wars at the minute and killing, the amount of, you know, people that are left behind, in so many different areas. Suicide's another one, you know, which is another thing that I've dealt with many times over the years. The people that are left behind, and, you know, the questions that come up, and the pain that's left behind, that people need to go on with and deal with. You know, how do you find forgiveness for that if you've been the one that's been left to deal with it? You see it just now in the Middle East, you know, when the numbers that are being quoted and are being talked about, you know, hundreds and hundreds of thousands of people that have been, you know, basically their life's been taken, for what, you know, and then what's left behind, the mums and the dads, or the brothers and sisters, or that have been left behind to try and deal with the loss of loved ones. Like, how do you get to a place where you're able to forgive them? And there's a lot going on within it, and there's a few quotes that lead into forgiveness. One of my favourites was something I heard a long time ago from Wayne Dyer, and it came from Mark Twain. For many years I thought it was William Blake, but it's actually Mark Twain. And what he said was, within one of his poems, that forgiveness is the fragrance that the violet sheds on the heel that has crushed it. So the heel that crushes the flower, crushes the violet, you know, then the fragrance that gets released from it is forgiveness. And, you know, God bless the poets, absolutely. And I quoted that last night, and I was talking to you know, this person about, you know, to get beyond this. You know, you've been carrying it for the best part of, you know, 31, 32 years now. You know, how do you get beyond it? How do you get to that place where, you know, you really have a choice to make? And that choice is very simple, but it is no easy. And then if you do have the choice to make, then how do you do it? And that's where my own experience in terms of how I did it. Is all I can really go with. This is the way that I did it. This is the way that I was able to get beyond not just that individual situation. That was probably the hardest one, but so many different things over the past, even last weekend, you know, where again, the opportunity to forgive somebody who'd wronged me. It's just fascinating how many times I've done it over the years, and I use the same process every single time. You know, so we have got a choice. With free will, we have got a choice, and the choice is very simple. You know, if you're tired of, you know, being in that place, you know, you're in that victimhood mentality where something wrong has been done to you, somebody's basically, you know, done something to you, and it's had a negative impact on your life, then what is it you need to do to get beyond it? And a great quote for Jesus Christ, and there's quite a few quotes to do with forgiveness when you start to look it up, but Jesus Christ, when he was on the cross, apparently what he said was, "Forgive them, for they know not what they do." And that is leading into ignorance. You know, again, another quote: "Ignorance is our only sin." And, you know, the forgiveness that I was able to find in that particular situation with me, sitting deep in meditation, first and foremost, you know, like, why did they do it? And, you know, could they have not done it? Could they have done it a different way? You know, could they have, you know, had less of an impact? You know, what would need to have happened to them? What would they have needed? Like, who's the person they would have needed to be to not do that? And very quickly. And the way that I got beyond it was, you know, the realization of ignorance means we don't know. So this particular individual did not have any other way of doing it, and very, you know, on the back of that straight away, the realisation of, and this is where the biggest penny drop moment was, like, oh my God, like, what has actually happened to them that made them the person that they became, that then, you know, they then handed that on to other people and passed it on because they couldn't do it any other way, you know. So ignorance is our only sin, absolutely, and, you know, the realisation of someone else who's done something to you, and in fact they couldn't do it any other way, and if they could have, they would have, but because of, obviously the level of vibration at the level of consciousness that they're at, then they couldn't have done it in any other way. So at that point, their behaviours and their actions and the negative impact that it had on me, then there was nothing else they could have done. But it was that seeing them, and at this point, this human being was dead. They drank themselves to death a long time before this. I had this realisation, and the thought of where they were and how much suffering they'd been through in their own life, and that penny drop of what it was that actually must have happened to them, to make them go down the path that they went down, which ended up being on my path and negatively affecting me. That was the biggest thing. And at that point, you've got a choice to make. When you see them, and this is a time when I was in a really advanced, like spiritual practices, meditation, really at the point where I wasn't quite where I'd experienced, enlightenment and experienced the divine and all its glory, but I was far enough along my journey to realise that, the way the world had basically negatively affected them, then it wasn't their fault. And for me, and something I talk about all the time, is how to break the chains. How do we stop the rot? How do you not pass it on? How do you not pass it down? I do this all the time and talk about it all the time with parents, sort of, they've wronged their children, in so many different ways. The amount of people that I work with, there's so many bits in it that's normally today with a mum or a dad that's not been there, or certainly not done what's been required for the individual to think or to get what they needed, and the blame that goes towards the parents. And every single time I think of, my experience with that individual and thinking, like, they obviously did their best. Was it good enough? Absolutely not. But, if they could have done it in a different way, then I'm pretty sure they would have. But because the life experience for them and because what happened to them, then there was no other option for them. So again, ignorance means we don't know. And if you don't know, and that's your life experience and that's the way that you do it, then there's nothing else you can really do about it. So at that point, you've got a choice to make. And the choice is no easy. It really isn't. It's very, very difficult, that choice, unless you get to a point where you realise that you've carried it for long enough, that the pain and the suffering, if you continue to think about it, isn't going to go away. And at that point, then, when forgiveness does come up, like, how do you do that? How do you get beyond it? And revenge is one way that most people do. You look at the world just now and you see what's getting done within the world, how these wars, how they never ever seem to end. Again, Wayne Dyer taught me a long time ago that if you're going to seek revenge, then you better dig 2 graves. And it's very much like this with forgiveness. When you're feeling resentment or anger or blame towards somebody who's wronged you, and if you do seek revenge, or even if you're still carrying it and harbouring it and reliving it, then at that point, it's really the person that's making the most, having the biggest detrimental effect on is yourself. And it's not fine, but if you can't do anything about it, then there's nothing you can do. But once you've got awareness, once you've got a different way of going through this life, then at that point, then there must be a different way of doing it. So at that point, forgiveness does start to come up, and then the journey begins. And there only is one way to get beyond the heavy stuff, as far as I can see, and that's with the spiritual practices. The intention is to start off for 10. I need to get beyond this. This is making me sick. This is not working. I've carried this long enough. I'm in too much pain because of it. It's had such a negative impact on me that I would like to get beyond it. And then, when you get to that stage, then the only way, as far as I can see, talking about it makes it worse. The therapies, the different tools and techniques that so many people use obviously don't work. The minute you're talking about it, the minute you're reliving it, then how do you get beyond it? And it's very easy to say let it go. It's very easy to say what's done is done. And how do you then get on with your life and get to the place that you would like to be? And the spiritual way is the only way that I know that gets beyond not just being able to live with it or deal with it, but so you get beyond it and basically transcend it to the point that I'm at and have been for a long time now, where I'm able to help other people that have been through stuff that traditional stuff doesn't fix and doesn't make better. And that choice to go in and to dig it up that one time and then to see what it is it needs done, and then the healing process that takes place. For me, it was a meditation, sitting in silence, not actually looking for it at that time, aware of that I was working on it. It was in my consciousness. It was definitely something that I was, moving towards, but sitting in that sacred space, sitting in the silence, in the middle of the night, complete silence, sitting in union with the divine, and the opportunity when it came up, which it will do, if you've got it, in terms of something you're working on. The desire to get beyond, the desire to heal, then at some point it will come up, and I realised, what they had been through, and in fact they couldn't do it any other way. And to let it go, and to let go and let God was another one. How do you basically let it go? How do you get it out of your life? Handing it over to the divine, handing it over to God, allowing them, to deal with whatever they need to deal with in terms of being with God, letting God deal with that. That isn't my job, that wasn't my work. And really, when I rested in my heart, and I saw them, this individual, as just another human being that had been decimated because of their own life experience. At that point, I've instantly broke into tears because of what had happened to them, even though I had no obvious specific, evidence of what had happened. Didn't know any specifics. Didn't know their own story or what had happened to them. But obviously, it must have been pretty dark for them to become who they became. And I burst into tears because I saw them as a human being that had been wronged with this fucking world as well. And at that point, very, very quickly, I had nothing but love for them. And the interesting thing that happened was when I was able to, generate, and it happened instantly. Again, when you're sitting in those high elevated states of meditation, is when you're in the place of love, when you're in that place of unconditional love, when you're in union with God, then you talk about non-duality in terms of this world and all the yin and yang and the black and the white and the contrast in terms of the different perspectives on things. When you're in that space of meditation, when you're in union with the field, when you're in union with God, then things like love and compassion and empathy and all these higher elevated states, these vibrations that make everything better. When you're in that place, to bring love into that situation is a lot easier. Then obviously if you say to somebody like what's happened to you, who did what to you, and then how do you forgive them, and then just send them love, that isn't going to happen. The mind won't allow that to happen, and neither should it. You can't do it from that level. But when you're out your head and you're back in your heart, it's a different language and it's a different place and it's a different space, and at that point you've got a chance. So just being able to send them love, for me, the tears that came very quickly were tears of relief, because instantly when I forgave them, then the healing that took place, I was able to free them, from whatever hold I had on them at some level. But the healing that took place within myself, the freedom that took place within myself instantly, the relief that took place when I was able to basically let it go completely out of my body, was something that needs to be experienced to understand. So by forgiving another human being for what they've done to you, you actually free yourself and you're able to heal yourself. That's the way that I was able to do it. And it's... to forgive and to forget is, that's one bit of it. Obviously, do you ever really forget about it if something really significant's happened to you? Probably not. But to forgive and then realise how far you've came, or the abilities that you've had to get beyond it. And for me, for anybody that does this kind of work, then at that point, the only way you get to help somebody is through experience. The only way you get to share and become a coach, I believe, is through experience. So at that point, I feel like many of us almost have to go through it, so we can then get out the other side, so we can help other people. And that's a really empowering place to get to, obviously. So forgiveness is no easy. There is a way. I do believe, in fact I know, the spiritual path, the spiritual process, being in meditation, it takes a lot of time, sometimes depending on how severe it is. It's like the layers of the onion. There can be many, many bits to it. Many times over the years, there's been other instances, again, of a sexual nature where I've thought I've dealt with it, and then many, many years later it will come up from a different perspective. Maybe I've been through some sort of elevation in my consciousness. I'm at a different place and I'm seeing things from a different bit, and you think you've dealt with it and it'll come up again, and it's like, fuck, I thought I dealt with that. And again, it's the same process. You go back inside, you get into your heart, you realise that they were in ignorance, they were doing their very, very best. If they could have done any better, then I'm sure they would have. And at that point, you get a chance to, bring in the love and send them all the best. The realisation that they were doing their best and then the healing takes place. One kind of caveat to that is that those that are, intentionally still trying to hurt you, when you look at the world just now, and there's two bits to this, somebody who's ignorant in ignorance and has a negative effect on you and didn't know, they get a pass, but when you look at the world and you look at, the things that are taking place within the world just now, and if there's a constant, desire to wrong you or to hurt you, or to do you harm, then at that point it's not really a case of forgiving and forgetting. You can't do that at that point. Fuck them, they need dealt with, they need to be taken out and replaced, and done away with. So in that instance there's definitely a reason to be fighting. There's definitely a reason to stand up with integrity and say no and fight against it. But when you're carrying some sort of past trauma or significant event that's had a negative impact on your life, you've got the choice to make as to whether you want to keep going, to keep holding on to it, to keep allowing it to have the toxic effect on your life experience, or if you've had enough, then the intention to get rid of it, the intention to transcend it, the intention to get beyond it, and get the lessons that you basically needed to get from that experience. And hopefully there are some. I know with every single negative thing that's happened to me, there's always been like good stuff, and I've learned almost everything from the stuff that went wrong against me or happened to me or I created myself, way more than the stuff that's went right. So to give them a pass, to forgive other people, a big part of it as well is to forgive yourself. When I look back on my own life and I think of some of the things that I've done in my own life, again, ignorance was my only sin. I didn't know. And really significantly, one of the things I was talking about in terms of forgiving other people was vaccination. I remember sitting in meditation one morning and thinking about, the day that I received the vaccine. I was 13 years old, I think. And the vaccine that didn't waste my life or ruin my life completely, but it certainly compromised me in terms of my physical health and well-being. Cost me a professional football career, no question about it. Something that I still carry to this day, in terms of the negative impact that vaccine had on me, what it did to my my immune system, what it did to my nervous system, how much it took away from me. And I remember my mum sitting in meditation one morning, God bless and rest your soul, mum. But I remember sitting, and I remember my mum walking down the corridor, to basically take me into this room to get this vaccine that was basically going to, make me really well and put me in bed for the next few months, and cost me, everything that I believe I was putting this earth today, which was to play football. How limited is that? But that's where I was at the time. And I realised that her intentions were pure. She thought she was doing good. She thought she was doing right. She was trying to thought this was going to protect me. And whether those who administered the vaccines, or not the ones that basically gave it to me, but the ones that decided to roll them out and basically decide that people of a certain age need to get these poisons put into their body. I realised my mum didn't know. She was ignorant. She just didn't know. She thought she was doing her best. And I can't even tell you how hard I cried when I was able to, because I had to forgive her. And I'm even kind of welling up just now thinking about it. I'd actually to forgive my mum because she didn't know, and what it cost me in this life, was such a valuable lesson. And then a few years later, when I'm looking back and I'm thinking, holy fuck, I vaccinated both my kids, the very first vaccines towards the end when they started to get a wee bit older, and I realised it was the vaccines that basically that damaged me. Again, I can't tell you how much pain and suffering that caused when I realised that I'd held my son and my daughter down and allowed them to put the poisons into them. Again, I was ignorant. I didn't know. I was doing my best, and we researched at the time. Looking back, there was definitely something wasn't right about it, but we thought we were doing our best, and they scaremongered us into it, But at the time, you're doing your best, and then both my son and my daughter, there was negative impacts from vaccinations, absolutely, but I didn't know. So then I had to forgive myself, and that was a hard one. That's maybe the hardest I've ever cried when I realised what I'd done to them, when my mum had done to me, maybe in a different level. We'll never know, but certainly a negative impact that, and something that should have been and could have been avoided, if I had awareness and I understood, what was in, those fucking syringes, but I didn't know, so to forgive myself in that instance, have compassion for myself, in so many different instances, the things that I've done in my life, the things that I look back on with regret, every single time when something comes up and you get the feeling in the stomach and you think, who was that, how was I able to do that? I was ignorant. I didn't know, and now that I do know, then I obviously do it in a very, very different way. I believe, again, I had to go through all those negative experiences, so I can then learn, get beyond it, transcend, heal myself the best that I've been able to do. Will I ever get back to the way that it was meant to be in this lifetime? Before that vaccination I received, going back 40 plus years ago, probably not. I'm still compromised, I do believe, in terms of my immune system and the pain that I feel within my body, because my body's still firing because of what's inside it. But at this point, it's right, okay, so I now have awareness. I can now help other people so that they can then avoid these traps that are placed before us. So to forgive, not to forget, but to transcend is very, very important. When you do, forgive somebody. For me, somebody that's, and this was current as early as kind of last week, and it's like, the minute somebody harms me, the minute somebody has a go at me, the minute somebody, in this particular instance, somebody was stealing from me again, and very, very quickly, I know how this goes, I know the path that I'm going to go down and how long it can take to get to the other side. So at that point, you've got a choice, and for me, straight away, it was unconditional love for their ignorance, sending them all the love in the world in terms of wishing them all the best. But at that point, it's like, to forgive somebody, then I do not let them back into my life. I send them all the best, I wish them all the best from my heart, I really do, but I don't want to hang about with them. I don't want to have them anywhere near me. I don't want them to be in my life experience, for many, many reasons, so to forgive, to forget, absolutely, in terms of to move beyond it, but I don't want them in my life, so I take them out of my life instantly, and I do away with them in terms of, I don't want to see them again. I'll block their phone numbers, I'll block any access on social media, so I don't need to see them again, so that, the lesson has been learned. But at that point, it's time to go our separate ways, so aye, that's forgiveness. That's where I'm at with forgiveness. It's such a powerful process to go through. It's such a, in terms of healing, in terms of, transcending the stuff that's holding you back, the disease that's stored within the body, the tension and the negative emotions and, the toxicity that we carry by something negative that has happened. To give yourself that gift and, to forgive others and to go on that journey of forgiveness is something I would absolutely recommend to anybody. It's so powerful, and obviously the world is needing a lot of it just now. And you can't do it in the head. It needs to come from the heart level. It needs to come from the soul level. So meditation, getting quiet, going inside, and really, really meaning it. Finding whatever it is you need to find, to see their perspective on it, to see their ignorance, to know that they were doing their best, and then to send them love, to forgive them. To allow that healing to come into yourself, and then to deal away with them, to cut them out, and then to take them out of your life. That's the way that I do it. So I hope this helps. I'm sending my best to you and yours. God bless. Take it easy. Peace out, and bye for now.